Every mother's son is someone's beloved child. But in war, we forget this simple truth. Mehmet Özkan's final letter home would remind the world that enemies are just boys fighting for different flags. It was November 27, 1915, when 19-year-old Mehmet Özkan sat in his dugout on the cliffs of Gallipoli trying to find words that would comfort his mother. The oil lamp flickered in the cold wind that swept across the peninsula, casting dancing shadows on the photograph he kept pressed against his heart dash, a picture of Fatma Özkan, taken on the day he left their small village near Çanakkale. In that photograph, his mother was smiling, but Mehmet could see the worry in her eyes. She had already lost her husband to illness 3 years earlier. Now her eldest son was fighting in a war that seemed to have no end, defending the very soil where she had been born. "My dearest Anne," Mehmet began, using the Turkish word for mother that carried all the warmth and love of his childhood. "I hope this letter finds you and Ahmet in good health. The olives should be ready for harvest now. I wish I could be there to help you and my little brother bring them in." But what Mehmet was about to write in this letter would reveal a truth that would change not just his mother's understanding of war, but connect two grieving women across enemy lines in ways neither could have imagined. Mehmet had been at Gallipoli for 7 months now, ever since the foreign ships had appeared on the horizon and the first soldiers had landed on the beaches below. He had watched his homeland become a battlefield, seen the olive groves of his childhood turned into trenches and gun positions. Unlike many of his fellow soldiers, Mehmet had not enlisted out of hatred for the enemy. He had come because this was his home, his mother's land, his ancestors' soil. The men landing on those beaches were invaders, yes, but Mehmet understood they were also sons, brothers, husbands, just like him. His sergeant, Hassan Bey, was a veteran of the Balkan Wars, a hard man who had seen too much death. "Don't think of them as people, boy," Hassan had told him during his first week. "Think of them as targets. It's easier that way." But Mehmet couldn't stop thinking of them as people. When he looked through his rifle sights, he didn't see faceless enemies. He saw young men who probably missed their mothers just as much as he missed his. This compassionate nature would soon put Mehmet in a situation that would test everything he believed about duty, mercy, and the true cost of war. The attack had come at dawn on November 28th. The ANZAC soldiers had moved across no man's land in small groups, trying to take the Turkish positions on the ridge. Mehmet had been in his firing position, watching the enemy advance, when something unexpected happened. One of the attacking soldiers had become separated from his unit. The young man, he couldn't have been much older than Mehmet, had taken cover behind a fallen tree, trapped between the Turkish positions and his own lines. He was wounded, Mehmet could see that much, clutching his left arm and breathing heavily. For 20 minutes they had stared at each other across 30 yards of broken ground. The ANZAC soldier had his rifle pointed at Mehmet's position. Mehmet had his rifle pointed back. Neither had fired. In that strange, suspended moment, Mehmet found himself studying the enemy soldier's face. The man had fair hair and blue eyes, and there was something in his expression that Mehmet recognized. Not hatred or bloodlust, but fear. The same fear that Mehmet felt every day. The fear of dying far from home, of never seeing his mother again. What happened next would define not just Mehmet's character, but create a connection that would outlast the war itself. Slowly, carefully, Mehmet lowered his rifle. The gesture was small, but in the context of war it was revolutionary. He was choosing to see the humanity in his enemy, to acknowledge that the young man across from him was someone's beloved son. The ANZAC soldier, his name was Billy Thompson, though Mehmet wouldn't learn this until much later, seemed stunned by the gesture. For a moment he too lowered his weapon. In that brief instant they were not Turkish and Australian soldiers. They were just two frightened boys far from home, caught in something bigger than themselves. Billy reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph, a picture of a woman who looked remarkably like Mehmet's own mother. Worried eyes, graying hair, the unmistakable expression of a mother sending her child to war. He held it up so Mehmet could see it, then pointed to himself and nodded. Mehmet understood. This was Billy's mother, just as Fatma was his. In that moment, the war seemed like madness. How could they be trying to kill each other when their mothers probably worried about them in exactly the same way? But their moment of shared humanity was about to be shattered by the harsh reality of war, and the consequences would haunt both their families forever. The shot came from Mehmet's left, another Turkish soldier who had seen the exchange and misunderstood it. To him, it looked like Mehmet was surrendering, or worse, collaborating with the enemy. The bullet struck Billy Thompson in the chest, and he fell backward behind the fallen tree. Mehmet cried out, not in victory, but in anguish. He had seen something precious destroyed, a moment of human connection lost to the machinery of war. Without thinking, he left his position and ran toward the wounded ANZAC soldier, ignoring the shouts of his sergeant and the danger of exposing himself to enemy fire. Billy was still alive when Mehmet reached him, but barely. Blood was spreading across his uniform and his breathing was shallow and labored. With his dying breath, Billy pressed the photograph of his mother into Mehmet's hand and whispered something in English that Mehmet didn't understand at the time, but would later learn meant, "Tell her I tried to be good." What Mehmet did next would cost him his life, but create a legacy that would connect two mothers in an extraordinary bond of shared grief and understanding. Mehmet stayed with Billy until he died, holding the young man's hand and whispering prayers in Turkish. Prayers for the soul of an enemy who had become, in those final moments, a brother. When Billy's breathing stopped, Mehmet carefully placed the photograph of Billy's mother back in the dead soldier's pocket, along with something else, a letter he had been writing to his own mother. The letter was in Turkish, but at the bottom, in broken English learned from a teacher in his village, Mehmet had written, "To Billy's mother, your son was brave. He showed me a picture of you. You look like my Anne. I am sorry for war. I hope someday mothers not send sons to die. Your son's friend, Mehmet." When Mehmet returned to the Turkish lines, Sergeant Hassan was waiting for him, furious. "What were you doing out there, boy?" "Helping the enemy." "He was dying, Sergeant. He was just a boy like me." "He was the enemy," Hassan shouted. "And now, because of your foolishness, you've exposed our position. The ANZAC forces will counterattack within the hour. Hassan was right. The ANZAC forces, having seen one of their own fall, launched a fierce assault on the Turkish positions. In the chaos that followed, Mehmet found himself separated from his unit, trapped in a shell crater as machine gun fire swept across the ridge. It was in this shell crater, as enemy artillery rained down around him, that Mehmet would write the letter that would change two families forever. Using a pencil stub and a piece of paper torn from his field notebook, Mehmet began what he somehow knew would be his final letter home. The words came slowly at first, then faster as he realized how much he needed to say. "My beloved Anne," he wrote, "if you are reading this, then Allah has called me home to be with Baba. I want you to know that I died defending our land, but also that I learned something important in my final days here." He paused, listening to the sound of approaching footsteps. The ANZAC soldiers were advancing, searching for survivors. He had perhaps minutes left. "I met an enemy soldier today, Anne. His name was Billy, and he showed me a picture of his mother. She looked so much like you, the same worried eyes, the same love. I realized that the men we are fighting are not monsters. They are sons, just like me, with mothers who love them just like you love me." What Mehmet wrote next would reveal the true wisdom he had gained from his encounter with Billy Thompson, and provide comfort to two mothers who would never meet but would share the same grief. "I know this might be hard to understand, Anne, but I don't hate the enemy anymore. How can I hate someone whose mother loves him the way you love me? War makes us forget that our enemies are human, but today I remembered. And I think that remembering made me more human too." The footsteps were getting closer. Mehmet could hear voices speaking in English, searching through the debris of battle. He wrote faster. "Please don't hate the men who killed me, Anne. They are fighting for their country just as I fought for ours. Their mothers will cry for them just as you will cry for me. Maybe someday when this war is over, mothers like you and mothers like theirs will find a way to make sure this never happens again." A shadow fell across his paper. Mehmet looked up to see an ANZAC soldier standing at the edge of the crater, rifle raised. The soldier was young, maybe 17, with tears streaming down his face. He had probably never killed anyone before. In his final moments, Mehmet would make one last gesture that would ensure his letter reached not just his own mother, but Billy Thompson's family as well. "Wait," Mehmet said in the few words of English he knew. He held up the letter, then pointed to himself and said, "Mother." Then he pointed to the soldier and repeated, "Mother." The young ANZAC soldier understood. This was a letter home, a final message from a son to his mother. Even in war, some things were sacred. Mehmet carefully tore the letter in half. On one half, he had written his message to his mother in Turkish. On the other half, he wrote in broken English, "To Billy Thompson's mother in Australia. I was with your son when he died. He was brave. He showed me your picture. You should be proud. He talked about you at the end. From Mehmet Özkan, Turkish soldier and Billy's friend." He handed both pieces to the ANZAC soldier, along with Billy's photograph and the wooden cross that Billy had been carving. "Please," he said in English, "mothers." The young soldier nodded, understanding the sacred trust he was being given. These were not just pieces of paper, they were the final words of sons to their mothers, messages that transcended the boundaries of war and nationality. What happened to those letters would create one of the most extraordinary friendships in the history of war, proving that even in humanity's darkest moments, love can bridge any divide. Mehmet Özkan died in that shell crater on November 28, 1915, but his letter lived on. The young ANZAC soldier, true to his word, ensured that both halves of the letter reached their destinations. Mehmet's portion was delivered to Fatma Özkan in her village near Çanakkale. Billy's portion eventually made its way to Eleanor Thompson in Melbourne. When Eleanor Thompson received Mehmet's message about her son, she was initially confused. Who was this Turkish soldier who claimed to have been with Billy when he died? But as she read the broken English words, she began to understand. This young man had shown her son compassion in his final moments, had treated him not as an enemy, but as a fellow human being. Fatma Özkan, meanwhile, learned from her son's letter that he had died trying to help an enemy soldier, that he had chosen mercy over hatred even in the midst of war. Both mothers were devastated by their losses, but they were also strangely comforted by the knowledge that their sons had found humanity in the midst of inhumanity. What happened next was unprecedented. Eleanor Thompson, with the help of the Red Cross, managed to send a letter to Fatma Özkan. It was translated into Turkish by volunteers, and it began a correspondence that would last for decades. "Dear Mrs. Özkan," Eleanor wrote, "I am the mother of Billy Thompson, the Australian soldier your son helped in his final moments. I want you to know that your Mehmet was a good man, and that his kindness to my Billy has given me great comfort in my grief." Fatma's reply, translated into English, was equally moving. "Dear Mrs. Thompson, our sons found friendship in a place of war. Perhaps we can find friendship in our shared sorrow. They showed us that mother's love is the same everywhere." The correspondence between the two mothers continued for 30 years. They exchanged photographs, shared stories of their sons' childhoods, and eventually in 1955, Eleanor Thompson traveled to Turkey to meet Fatma Özkan in person. The meeting at Mehmet's grave overlooking the Dardanelles was witnessed by journalists from around the world. "We are not enemies," Eleanor said that day, placing flowers on Mehmet's grave while Fatma placed flowers on a memorial to Billy. "We are mothers who lost our sons to war but found each other through their love." The wooden cross that Billy had been carving and which Mehmet had ensured was returned to Billy's family became a symbol of their friendship. Eleanor had it inscribed with words in both English and Turkish. "In memory of all mothers' sons who taught us that love is stronger than war." Today, nearly 110 years later, the letters between Fatma Özkan and Eleanor Thompson are preserved in both the Australian War Memorial and the Çanakkale Martyrs Memorial. They stand as testament to a simple but profound truth that Mehmet Özkan understood in his final moments, that every soldier is someone's beloved child, and that recognizing this shared humanity is the first step toward peace. Mehmet's last letter reminds us that even in war's darkest hours, there are those who choose compassion over hatred, understanding over ignorance, love over fear. His story and the friendship it created between two grieving mothers proves that the bonds of human love are stronger than the divisions of nationality, religion, or politics. In the end, Mehmet Özkan's greatest victory was not in battle, but in his recognition that his enemy was also his brother, that Billy Thompson's mother was also his mother, that all mothers' tears taste the same regardless of the flag their sons died defending. Every mother's son is someone's beloved child. Mehmet Özkan never forgot this truth, and because of his compassion neither should we.